Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Ghana Ganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Ghana Ganatam Praptasya Kalyana Gurnana Vasya Vande Guru Shri Charana Ravindam Praptasya Kalyana Gurnana Vasya Vande Guru Shri Charana-Ravindam Vande Guru Shri Charana-Ravindam Charana-Ravindam Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nritya Gita Vaditramadhyam Manasurasena Mahaprabhu ki Gita Romanchakam pasru Taranga bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charana-Ravindam Romanchakam pasru Taranga bhajo Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shringara Tanma Dhiramarjanado Aradhana Nityanana Shringara Tanma Juktasya Bhaktam Sa Niyunjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charana-Ravindam Niyunjatopi Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavad Prasada Swatana Triptan Hari Bhakta Shanghan Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavad Prasada Swatana Triptan Hari Bhakta Shanghan Kridaiva Tripte Bhajata Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Charana-Ravindam Bhajata Shadeva Vande Guru Shri Shiradikama Vavayara Para Madhurya Leela Gunarupa Namna Shiradikama Vavayara Para Madhura Leela Gunarupa Namna Pratikshana Swa Danalalupasya Vande Guru Shri Charana-Ravindam Vande Guru Shri Charana-Ravindam Ne kunjayono Ratikeli Siddhai Jajali Virjukti Apekshaniya Ne kunjayono Ratikeli Siddhai Jajali Virjukti Tatrati Dakya Atibala Bhasya Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vrindam Ati Bhagava Sakcha Dharitena Shamasta Shastre Uktas Tatha Bhavyataiva Sadhuve Sakcha Shastre Uktas Tatha Bhavyataiva Kintu Prabharja Priya eva tasya Bande Gurashi Charanaro Vrindam Priya eva tasya Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada Yasya prasadam nagati kutapi Yasya prasada bhagavat prasada Yasya prasadam nagati kutapi Dhyayam stubham stasya yasastrin sandhyam Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Dhyayam Stubham Stasya Yashastri Sandhya Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Dhyayam Stubham Stasya Yashastri Sandhyam Vande Gurashi Charanarvindam Dhyayam Yashastri Sandhyam Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Nama Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunavadi Patsata Dishatarine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Patata Dishata Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Ram Hare Hare Namah Krishna Jadavaya Namah Jadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namah Gopal Govindaram Shri Madhusudan Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattaraguna Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhav, Radha Nila Madhava, Radhe Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadrama, Jaya Sudarshan Chakra. Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Sitaram, Sitaram, Jaya Lakshman Hanuman. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Pramanande Haribo, Jaya Vishwapar Param Saprabhajakacharya, Ashtutara Sarasi Shimad, Iskon Pratishta, Bhiviti Samstapakacharya, Vaishnava Siramani, Gaura Priya Jana Krishna Prema Bhakti Datta Patita Pavana, His Divine Grace, Abhacharamina Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ji Ki Jai, Shri Gauriya Guru Varga Patiti Udhara Ki Jai, Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Guna Satguru Swami Prabhu Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ji Ki Jai, Nantakoti Vaishnava Vrindi Ki Jai, Prem Si Koho Si Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai, जय परम दयाल से नित्यानंद प्रभु की प्रेम नाम संकीर्तने का जनक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिदानंद स्मरण गौरंग चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि मावृणावतार की जय गोलोकेर प्रमधान हरि नाम संकीर्तन जग की जय जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय बृहद मृदंग ट्वेंस नैन बुक डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन सेवा की जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपना राधा कुंद श्याम कुंड गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय श्री ब्रजबिम वृंदावन मथुर धाम की जय जलोशिव श्री श्री राधा नील माधव की जय श्री मायापुर नवद्वीप एक चक्र धाम की जय परम करुण श्री गौर निताय की जय श्री पुरुषोत्तम क्षेत्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय श्री श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु श्रीमती सुभद्रा देवी सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशना कर सिंगरे भगवान की जय जय गंगा माई जमुना माई की जय तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी भक्ति देवी की जय बोलो श्री मथुरा रानी की समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय निताय गौरी प्रमानंदी all glories to somebody all glories to somebody all glories to somebody all glories glories Shri Guru Shri
नमस्ते नरसिंहाय प्रह्लादलाददायिने हिरण्यकाशिने हिरण्यकाशीपूर्वक्षः शीलाटङ्कानखालये इतो नरसिंहो परतो नरसिंहो यतो यतो यामि ततो नरसिंह बहिर्नरसिंह हृदये नरसिंह नरसिंहमदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये तव कर कमलवरे नाखामद्भुत शृङ्गां दलिता हिरण्यकशिपु तनुभृङ्गां केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय केशवधृता नरहरिरूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय नरसिंहदेव जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय प्रहलाद महाराज जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल
श्री वृंदाई तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवे सत्यवताय नमो नमः। वृंदाई तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रदे देवे सत्यवताय नमो नमः। वृंदायै तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशव सत्य कृष्ण भक्ति प्रदे देवे सत्यवताय नमो नमः। जय श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जय।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः।
नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः।
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाओ हे अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो हे अभिलाषी।
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो हे अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो हे अभिलाषी।
जे तोमार शरण लोय तारा वंच पूर्ण हो
जे तुम्हार शरण
कृपा कोरि कोरो तारे वृंदावन वासी
कृपा कोरि कोरो तारे वृंदावन वासी।
हे मोर अभिलाष विलास कुंजे दियोवार
मोराए अभिलाष
विलास कुंजे दियोवार नयने हरिबो सदा युगल रूप रासी
अमिनायने
ये निवेदन धरो सखीरनुगत कोरो
हे निवेदन धरो सखीरनुगत कोरो।
सेवाधिकार दिए कोर निज दासी
कर
दीना कृष्ण दास को ये ना मोरा हो।
दीन कृष्ण दास का ये नाम मोरा।
श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा ये न भाषी।
श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा ये नवासी।
श्री राधा गोविंदा प्रेमे सदा ये न भाषी।
श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये नवासी।
यानी कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे।
कानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे।
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे।
कानि
कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे। यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे।
कानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे।
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे।
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे।
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे।
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे।
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे। जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी। जय वृंदे देवी जय वृंदे देवी जय वृंदे देवी जय वृंदा देवी निताय गौरा हरि बोल निताय गौरा हरि बोल जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय वृंदा देवी भक्ति देवी श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी की जय।
श्री वृंदाई तुलसी बाई प्रियाय के सब सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रादेवी शतवताय नमः नमः। वृंदाई तुलसी बाई प्रियाय के सब सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रादेवी शतवताय नमः नमः। वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय के सब सत्य कृष्ण भक्ति प्रादे देवी सत्तवताय नमः नमः। जय श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंदा देवी की जय। O Tulasi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you, his wishes fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him to make me rest to Vrindavan. My desire that you also grant me the residence of pleasure grows with Shri Vrindavan. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of Kavita angels of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maidservant. This very fallen and lowly servant Krishna praise. May I always swim in love with Shri Radha, Govinda, Srimati Tulasi Maharani, Vrinda Devi ki jai. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1. Blasphemy with devotees who dedicated life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider names of demigods and Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of the name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic scriptures or scriptures and pursuance of Vedic version. 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation to the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on strength of chanting the holy name. 8. To consider the chanting Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are often Vedas as fruitive activities, karma, kanda. 9. To instruct the faithless person by the glories of holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting the holy names and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. It also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna Prem. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord. They are just like desired trees, that they can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Jai Bancha Kalpatarubhacha Kripa Sindhubhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrindi ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shikhastakam ki Jai. Jaito Darpanam Janam Bhavamada Vagninivapanam Shreyakari Vachandrika Vitaranam Vidyavadhu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Purnamrita Shadanam Sarvatmasnam Parampara Vijayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Vaudha Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatrarpita Niyamita Shmarane Nakala Ita Drushitava Kripaya Bhagavan Mamapi Durdhaivam idishamya janina nuraga Trinadapi sunichena Tarorapi saishnuna Amanina manadena Kitanya sadari Na dhanam na janam na sundarim Kavitamba jagarisha kamaye Mama janmani janmanishari Bhavata bhakti rahaitu tvai Oinandatanu kinkaram Paritama vishame bhavam budho Kripaya tava pada pankaja Stita dhuli sadrisham vichintaya Nayanam kalarashu dharaya Vadanam gadagarudhaya gira Pulakarinchitam vapu kada Tavanama grahane bhavisyati Jugayitam nimishena Chakyusa prarusaitam Sunyaitam jagata sarvam Govinda virahiname Asli shava padaratam pinashtumam Adarshnan marmahatam karotuva Jatha tathava vidadhatu lampato Mat pranatastu saivana para Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sri Krishna Kam Ki Jai Namo Mahavarannaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gauratvishya Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunnavadi Patsatyari Shatarine. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditional life for the period of birth and death. This Sankirtan moment is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because its praise rays the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govind. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. They are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your casual devotional service, birth to birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet somehow or other I have fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up? And will the hairs of my body stand on the end of that recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he should remain so, even if sunders me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sri Krishna Ki Jai. Shri Guru Vandana Mangala Charan Ki Jai. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakyurmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatha Vintam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakambitam Cha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devam Gauravane Pracharine Nivishesha Sunnavadi Pasatyari Satarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namine Shri Varsavana Videvi Daitaya Kripabdvaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Prabhave Namaha Madhurjojala Premadhya Shirupanuga Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namastute Namaste Gauravani Shimurtaye Rinatarine Rupanuga Viruddha Pusidanta Dvantarine Nama Gaura Kishoraya Sakya Viragya Murtaye Vipralambhara Sambodhe Paramujayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Satchit Anandanamine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gaura Birbhava Bhumisvam Nirdesha Sajana Priya Vaishnava Sarva Bhuma Si Jagannatayate Namaha Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaivacha Paritanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavaranayo Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnayo Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gauratvishe Nama Panchatattamakam Krishna Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhakta Avataro Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakti Shaktikam He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namasute Jaitam Suratupangu Mama Mandamati Massarvasya Param Bhojo Radha Madana Mohanam Divyarvindaranya Kalpadumadha Shmara Nagara Shingasanastu Shmaradha Shila Govinda Devo Prishtali Visheva Manushmarami Shmanura Sara Sarambi Bamshvata Tatastita Karshan Venu Sanar Gopir Gopinata Shri Estuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrusabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Shri Guru Bandhan Mangala Charan Ki Jai Hare Krishna
Namaha Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presta Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityananda Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvisesa Srivadi Paskati Desatati Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Radha Shivasati Gaur Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Gaur Premanande Hari Bo. So today we did have homework for today, and I got 2 homeworks. And we're going to go over this and then continue with the unique qualities of Krishna. So Dhananjay, before you leave, can you give me what's printed? It's in the printer? Is there something there? No. No, not that. No. Anything printed out? Okay, all right, yeah. So, let's see. Mataji, you did homework? You want to speak about it?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Haribol.
The homework was about comparison of Plato's Allegro theory to Bhagavad Gita 15.1 to 15.4 verses.
So that is comparison of Plato's analogy of the cave to what is the the explanation of the inverted banyan tree explained in the first 4 verses of the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita.
Yes, Maharaj. I tried to find the differences between both and similarities. So I have made a table with Krishna's teachings on one side in Bhagavad Gita and Plato's theory. The first one is the Bhagavad Gita is, as we all know, 5,000 plus years old, whereas Plato's theory is just 2,000 years old according to the records.
2,500 years.
2,500 years. And in 15.1 itself, it says that the entanglement of this material world is compared here to a banyan tree. For one who is engaged in fruitive activities, there is no end to the banyan tree. He wanders from one branch to another, to another, to another. The tree of this material world has no end, and for one who is attached to this tree, there is no possibility of liberation. The Vedic hymns meant for elevating oneself are called the leaves of this tree. This tree's roots grow upward because they begin from where Brahma is located. The topmost planet of this universe. If one can understand this indestructible tree of illusion, then one can get out of it. Whereas Plato's allegory of the cave is a concept.
The cave.
Of the cave is the concept devised by the philosopher to ruminate on the nature of belief versus knowledge.
What does ruminate mean?
To differentiate.
To think about.
Yeah. The allegory begins with prisoners who have lived their entire lives chained inside a cave. Behind the prisoners is a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners are people carrying puppets or other objects. These cast shadows on the opposite wall. The prisoners watch these shadows, believing this is to be their reality, and they have known nothing else. Plato poses that one prisoner could become free. He finally sees the fire and realizes the shadows are fake. This prisoner could escape from the cave and discover there is a whole new world outside they were previously unaware of. This prisoner would believe the outside world is so much more real than that in the cave. He would try to return to free the other prisoners. Upon his return, he is blinded because his eyes are not accustomed to actual sunlight. The chained prisoners would see this blindness and believe they will be harmed if they try to leave the cave. And I found a picture of the banyan tree and how the 180-degree upward of spiritual world versus the material world, and Plato's analogy of the cave.
Okay, so first of all, you have to understand one thing. Plato and Socrates both were Mayavadis. They're not actually devotees. But Socrates is Plato's guru, and Plato wrote a whole book. He's written many books, but there's one book called The Republic, where he presents this analogy of the cave to understand what is the position of people in the world. So basically he's saying the whole world is an illusion. So that's what the Mayavadis say also. Do we as Vaishnavas say the world is an illusion? What do we say?
We call it a temporary place. It's another energy of Krishna.
Yeah, we don't say it's an illusion. When we see the concept of illusion is different for the Vaishnavas than for the Mayavadis. The Mayavadis say the whole world is an illusion, and individuality is an illusion, and so forth. But we say that the material world is real, but to find a place where you can be happy and forever is impossible. It's an illusion. It doesn't exist in the material world, because the material world is going to appear and disappear. Now, the energy of the material world is not an illusion. It's real, because it's coming from Krishna. So how can it be illusory? But all the forms made with material elements are temporary, and therefore it can bewilder a person, because at one point you have a body and then you're going to lose your body, or you have money and you're going to lose your money. You have a house and it burns down. So the idea that these forms are eternal is an illusion. But Socrates, and who taught Plato, he said that the spiritual world is a place where there are eternal forms and they're static. So that is another Mayavad concept. It's in other words, the spiritual world is not static; it's dynamic, and it's always increasing. So, because he was a little bit more, let's say, of a somewhat a little bit more personal than the hardcore Mayavadis, but he was still a Mayavadi. He was still an impersonalist. So he's saying there's perfect forms, static forms. Well, he's talking about a form. The Mayavadis don't talk about forms, right? They say there's no form. So he was a little bit more on the personal side than a hardcore Mayavadis, but he was still, impersonalist. So we see there's soft impersonalists, hard impersonalists, middle of the road impersonalists. Okay, what are we going to say?
Maharaj, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When you say static, does that mean there is no life in the spiritual world? Is that what their understanding
Yeah,
is?
nothing moves.
Not-
Static means nothing is moving. Right. Okay, so and that's a little bit of background to understand. Now, why are we comparing Plato's analogy of the cave to the explanation of the inverted banyan tree explained in the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita? Just to see how the Greeks had relationships with India, and they, in fact, Alexander the Great conquered part of India, right? So all these ideas they came up with were originally from the Vedas, but because they didn't accept bona fide spiritual masters, they tweaked it themselves. They sort of reshuffled everything and put their own kitschy into it. And that is why, but there are similarities. In other words, Plato's saying everything, and Socrates, that everything's an illusion, and he gives this example of the cave. So, but that's not the way it's explained in the Bhagavad Gita by Krishna. So it's just to see how the farther west you go, the more speculation there is. So, Greece is west of India, or of Bharat. So, and then Japan would probably be the most west, right? So by the time you get to Japan, it's completely confused and all nonsense. But here we see that the Greeks were very intelligent, but they lacked a bona fide spiritual master. The only Greek that could be considered bona fide is Pythagoras. So that's the homework for tomorrow, to look up Pythagoras. I'm going to give homework every day now, but not some big homework, something that you can look up very quickly. Pythagoras was the only Greek philosopher that you could call somewhat of a devotee. He had an ashram. In the ashram, they followed rules and regulations, and he was a guru. He was a great mathematician. He was an extraordinary person. Okay, Guna, you continue.
So Krishna called this process of going from one branch to the other, or getting out of this material world, as extrication, which means disentanglement, whereas Plato called him its allegory cave theory. Bhagavad Gita, I think I have to correct this, Praharaj, says this material world is a temporary illusion, rather I should say temporary place.
Yeah.
Whereas Plato's theory also agrees that this material world is an illusion.
Yes.
The next point, we have very defined process of how we can overcome this illusion, which is the basic principle of devotional service, is detachment from material activities and attachment to the transcendental service of the Lord.
So that's what's called Krishna consciousness.
Krishna consciousness.
Yes.
Yes. Explains the material world is in Plato's theory, it explains that the material world is illusion and there is a real truth. And
What explains?
the Plato's theory
Plato's
says
theory. Okay.
the material world is an illusion and there is a real truth above it. And for example, the one place I have read, Jesus is considered the messenger of.
That had nothing to do with Plato. That was the Christians who made a big mistake also.
Okay,
They used Greek philosophy to try and understand Jesus.
I think that's where I understood.
Yeah. So, if they had used Vedic philosophy to understand Jesus, they would have got it right. But they used Greek philosophy to understand Jesus, and Greeks, of course, most of them are Mayavadis, except for maybe Pythagoras. Go ahead.
The next one was Bhagavad Gita clearly represents different parts of the tree and what they represent. Roots going to higher planets, branches are various planetary systems, leaves are Vedic hymns, fruits are living entity activities, namely religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. Whereas Plato's allegory theory talks about empirical world, sun being a form of God, realms of forms, higher forms, lower forms, different opinions and particulars within that cave theory.
So you see that in ancient places like Persia, they worship the sun, and they consider that the sun is like the source of all energy in the world. Well, that is correct, but the sun is not the supreme source of everything. It's simply the Brahman effulgence being reflected off of the sun. But they sort of stop at the sun, because they correctly understood this is the source of all energy in the universe. But there's a source of that energy, and so they're missing the biggest part of the story. Okay, go ahead.
And we have an analogy in Bhagavad Gita that if we want to look at the tree, an analogy we can use is looking the shadow of the tree in the lake to understand how spiritual planets and this material world could have formed.
All right, repeat that again.
An analogy we can use is looking the shadow of a tree in the lake to understand how spiritual planets and this material world could have formed.
Okay, so let's get this one thing straight. The trees that we see in this world, their roots grow down and the branches grow up, right? Now, where do you see a tree where the branches go down and the roots go up? Well, if there's a tree on the edge of a river or a pond, right? When the sun is at a certain position, you'll see the shadow of the tree that's an inverted, that looks like it's upside down. Now you can look that up. There are pictures like that on the internet. So look up a tree on the edge of a pond. Its shadow is an upside down tree. It looks like upside down. So, therefore, it's a reflection, an inverted reflection and it's not the real tree. So, in the same way, it says that the banyan tree that's being talked about in the 15th chapter here, first to fourth verses, is not a real tree. It looks real, and as long as we're attached to it, we can never become free from the cycle of birth and death. We have to actually destroy that tree to get it out of our mind and see what the reality is. Okay, did you find a picture like that?
Yes, Mother.
Yeah. Okay, can you show it to people? Does it look upside down?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you see? So there is such a thing that you can see in the material world, but it's an upside down reflection on water, right? Now, if the water is a river, it looks like it's moving. If it's a pond, it may not look like it's moving, right? So, okay, so now go ahead, and then I'm going to say some things. Go ahead.
Impersonalists limit themselves thinking as Brahma being the top of the roots, think there is nothing beyond Brahma. But the reality is, Brahma is at the roots of an inverted tree. Then it is just a 180-degree view of a tree. The rest 180 degrees of the real tree knowledge is honestly missing for an impersonalist. In Plato's, knowing that there is more truth above us is all Plato and Socrates could come up with, but do not have more information than that.
So, like the Mayavadis, because Plato and Socrates are both Mayavadis, they're only giving a partial explanation, and that explanation, parts of it are wrong also. So this is the dilemma of the West, because Plato and Socrates are considered two of the most prominent philosophers in the Western history, and you can see they have a lot of things wrong. They have some things that are right, and a lot of things are wrong. And therefore, the Western whole system of knowledge is wrong. They have very few things that are right, and most everything is wrong. And you don't get a full picture of reality. And because of that, no one is happy. Nobody is really happy. They have just short periods of happiness and then a lot of misery. And you might not realize that when you're a teenager, but when you get older, you realize that most of my life was miserable. There were moments of happiness, at least I thought it was happiness, but it was just all based on sense gratification, just like we read the other day. And with all the scientific advancement and all the philosophical so-called books that have been written in the last, let's say, 1,000 years, the end result of all of that is sense gratification. Now, would you agree with that? What do you think, Prabhu? You don't agree with it? No, what do you think?
I don't agree.
Huh?
I don't agree.
Why not?
Because
That means all the scientific advancements that have been made in the last 1,000 years, especially the last 400 or 500 years, all the books of philosophy that have been written by so-called great philosophers, the end result of it is sense gratification.
yeah,
Why?
because you're not gonna get anything out of scientific advancement. Because in the end, like Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, and the scientists won't understand that out of all their scientific study.
Why will they not understand?
Because they're in illusion.
Okay, but you got to be more specific. I mean,
Because-
someone says to you, "Oh, the reason you don't understand is because you're in illusion." But how did you get into illusion? What is the illusion? What is that false concept that people have accepted.
Yeah, we're this body, and we're
Huh?
not this soul. And their ultimate goal is to have sense gratification.
Yes, those two things. They identify with the body, and they think that the goal of life is please the senses of the body. And they reject the existence of a spiritual world, of a supreme personality of Godhead. So this is the main reason why, after all that research that they've done, all the things that they've created in the form of, bridges and railroads and airplanes and rockets and cell phones, all that stuff, it's still sense gratification. We can see that. You just look at the news, look at television, look at movies. It's all about sense gratification, right? So,
the starting point itself is that, right, Mara?
well, the starting point is Krishna, but
No, in the sense like
yeah.
the progress, the scientific innovation is only happening for the purpose of sense gratification. So as a
Yes.
result, the end point is also only
Sense
more sense gratification.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Now, you don't have to believe what we're saying here. You can just look around you, what's happening in life, and what people talk about. Like, I've asked, like yesterday and the day before, what do your coworkers talk about? Mostly just sense gratification, right? What do the kids in school talk about? Mostly is sense gratification, or all of it is sense gratification. So we see that all this so-called progress has not been progress. It's gone in the wrong direction, and it keeps going in the wrong direction. It doesn't stop. Okay, good.
Maharaj, on that point, I have a question. Like, it's very rare, but when we say sense gratification, I got Mother Teresa in my thoughts. Like, she served without any expectation in a different country where she's not born. How do we
How do we talk about her?
not just Mother? There are people like that. We may know, we may not know, but who are serving selflessly.
Okay, look up. Was she a vegetarian? Look it up. She might have ended up being a vegetarian. I'm not sure. Was Mother Teresa a vegetarian? They have a Mother Teresa ashram here in Woodinville. You know that? Is that what it says?
In some places, but some places it said would only eat rice and salt.
Yeah. And it's-
Yeah, that's why I asked the question, because I've also read that she might have been a vegetarian at some time in her life. Where did you see that she eats meat, Prabhu?
It says straight first line, conversation, Mother Teresa was a non-vegetarian, like top upright.
Okay, so she was a non-vegetarian, but sometimes she ate rice only. Huh?
Because of her health condition, she used to prefer salt and rice. That's what it says.
Prefer, that doesn't mean.
Yeah, no, I think in the same sentence, later she and other nuns also ate small amounts of fruit and meat so that they had the strength and energy to serve the poor.
Oh, you get the energy from the meat, right? Yeah, so she's not the saint that she's built out to be. She did some good mundane, let's say, mundane charity, mundane work. It could be considered good in some ways, but it's not really good. If you notice, whenever Prabhupada is going to say something about Christianity, he will always mention, well, in your book it says thou shalt not kill, but you're killing many animals and eating them. So how can you say that your religion is going in the right direction? right? So that was the one thing he would always criticize about Christianity. Basically, he's saying you're not following your Bible, and they come back and say, no, you're misinterpreting it. In the Hebrew word for this is blah blah blah, and it means murder. It does not mean thou shalt not kill. So they come up with this phony explanation to try and get out of it. But the Bible clearly says, thou shalt not kill. That means kill anything, right? As one of the 10 Commandments. In fact, look up the 10 Commandments. Is it the first one or? Oh, no, the first one is thou shalt not accept any other God, but any deity as God. There's only one God, that is Jesus, something like that. But I think the second or third says thou shalt not kill.
Yeah. So the first one is you shall have no other gods before me.
Yes.
So the first one is you shall have no other gods before me. The second one is you shall not make idols.
Okay, yeah.
And number 3 is you shall not take the name of the Lord
In vain.
your God in vain.
Yeah.
And then number 4 is remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. That's
Holy
like the
day,
fast.
Sunday.
Honor your father and your mother.
Yeah.
And number 6, you shall not, here it says you shall not murder.
Yeah.
Thou shalt not kill, but they changed it. And then you shall not commit adultery, and you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor, and you shall not covet.
They always said murder. I mean, kill. Later on, they switched to murder because they were being criticized by Prabhupada and others. Okay. Did you find anywhere where it says thou shalt not kill?
Yeah, it says one of the commandments.
Huh?
One of the commandments is thou shalt not kill.
Yeah.
It's the sixth commandment.
No, I know it's the sixth commandment. But
Yeah, some places.
some places they switched to thou shalt not murder because people have been criticizing them. Because when it says kill, that means anything. Murder usually is a human being. Right. Okay, go ahead. You can finish.
And Krishna says we always should have an analytical study is needed to get out of this material existence. Socrates and Plato has definitely started with analytical study, but unfortunately they could not find more resources on this. And that is where I stopped sending you, Maharaj, but we had, I wrote more like,
Okay, go ahead.
there were Vedas for us to contemplate and reflect back to, but I couldn't find any source for Plato's theory where he can check back on.
Okay.
And
All
that's
right.
where I stopped.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maharaj.
So now we're going to have homework every day. So homework for tomorrow is to look up the one person that might be called somewhat bona fide in Greek history. That's Pythagoras. Okay, so now let's read these 4 verses in the beginning of the 15th chapter. And the first one is Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. So Krishna is speaking himself here. Urdvam mulam adasakam asvatam prahur avyayam chandam si yasyaparnani yastam veda savedavit. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is said that there is an imperishable, meaning an eternal, banyan tree, or a tree that cannot be destroyed, that has its roots upward and its branches downward, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. Okay, so in the purport, Prabhupada says, after the discussion of the importance of Bhakti Yoga, one may question, what about the Vedas? It is explained in this chapter that the purpose of Vedic study is to understand Krishna. Therefore, one who is in Krishna consciousness, who is engaged in devotional service, already knows the Vedas. So here, we could stop right there. that is the summary of what the Bhagavad Gita is about. It's to convince people to engage their life and their goals in serving Krishna. If you do that, you have understood all the Vedas and the real message of the Vedas, right? You don't have to study anything. You don't have to get PhDs. You don't have to write essays, nothing. Just, if you're engaged seriously in devotional service, following the rules and regulations of Bhakti Yoga, you have understood the Vedas. Vedaischa sarviraham eva vedya. The goal of the Vedas is to know Krishna. And if you know Krishna, then you will, as it says, aham sarvasya prabhavo matak sarvam pavartate iti matva bhajante mam buddhabhava samanvidha. Somebody who knows Krishna engages in devotional service to the Lord. So there we are. There's two main points: to know Krishna and to be engaged in his service always, under the with the help of Shiksha and Diksha gurus. So, therefore, one who is in Krishna consciousness, who is engaged in devotional service, already knows the Vedas. The entanglement of this material world is compared here to a banyan tree. For one who is engaged in fruitive activities, there is no end to the banyan tree. What are fruitive activities? Activities where we want to use the fruit for our own sense gratification. That's what fruitive activities means. Working for your own personal sense gratification. So, for one who is engaged in fruitive activities, there's no end to the banyan tree. In other words, you're stuck in this overwhelming tree. So a banyan tree, it has an original trunk. Just like, we see these trees here, they go up, they have some branches, but you can see it has one trunk, right? The banyan tree could have hundreds and thousands of trunks. There's one original one, but from every branch, a part of the branch grows downward, and then when it touches the ground, it will sprout roots, and then it'll grow, and you can't really tell which is the original trunk and which is the branch that has grown into a trunk, see? So if you go, the biggest banyan tree in the world, or at least one of the biggest ones, is in Calcutta, in the city. It's one entire city block. Have any of you ever seen it? No? Why don't you look it up? The biggest banyan tree in the world is in Calcutta. It may not be the biggest in the world, but it's one of the biggest. There might be a picture of it. See, now this is the right use of a cell phone. So you can use it for looking things up that you can't see right now, but we're talking about. Do you see it?
Yeah, it says it's in Calcutta. So the great banyan tree is located in the Acharya Jagadish Chandra Bose Botanical Garden in Howrah, near Calcutta.
Wow, Howrah is right in the center of Calcutta.
Yeah. It's a 3.5 acre.
3.5 acres.
Yeah.
1 acre is like 46,000 square feet, something like that. So it's big.
It's really big.
And you get lost in it. You get lost in it. And you can't tell where it started, where it ends. Now, we're talking about a banyan tree in the whole universe now. That's what this is talking about. And it's an upside down banyan tree. Okay, so then it says, the entanglement of this material world is compared here to a banyan tree. For one who is engaged in fruitive activities, there is no end to the banyan tree. He wanders from one branch to another, to another, to another. The tree of this material world has no end, and for one who is attached to this tree, there's no possibility of liberation. The Vedic hymns meant for elevating oneself are called the leaves of this tree. This tree's roots grow upward because they begin from where Brahma is located, the topmost planet of this universe. If one can understand this indestructible tree of illusion, then one can get out of it. So that's what Krishna consciousness is all about. It's to basically deconstruct this whole banyan tree of illusion that's in our mind also, and to become free of it, and then engage wholeheartedly in Krishna consciousness and devotional service. Okay. This process of extrication, in other words, getting out of this illusion, should be understood. In the previous chapters, it has been explained that there are many processes by which to get out of the material entanglement. So that's explained a lot in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita and other chapters, how to get out of the entanglement. And up to the 13th chapter, we have seen that devotional service to the Supreme Lord is the best way. Now, the basic principle of devotional service is detachment from material activities and attachment to the transcendental service of the Lord. So, detachment from material activities and attachment to the transcendental service of the Lord. The process of breaking attachment to the material world is discussed in the beginning of this chapter. The root of this material existence grows upward. This means that it begins from the total material substance, from the topmost planet of the universe. From there, the whole universe is expanded with so many branches representing the various planetary systems. The fruits represent the results of the living entity's activities, namely religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. So these are the 4 Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, 4, let's say, goals of Varnashram's system. Now, if you have a guru who's not a devotee, and there are many gurus that are not devotees, most of them are, then he can instruct you to follow the Varnashram system, but the ultimate end will be sense gratification, not, as it says, extrication or freedom from the Maya. Therefore, such gurus emphasize rituals. And sometimes we are criticized, Krishna consciousness is criticized because people say, well, you don't do any rituals, you just go jump up and down and chant Hare Krishna. And that is true, because we put all our emphasis on chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, much more than simply performing rituals. We have a few rituals. One would be considered the Upanayanam, or first initiation, second initiation, sannyas initiation. There are some rituals there, right? But the emphasis is on chanting Hare Krishna and engaging in practical, time-sensitive devotional service. So people would say, well, look, you do all these festivals, and oh, that's unnecessary, you just sit down and chant, the Vishnu Sahasranam Sotram, or the Lalita Sotram, or this Sotram, or that Sotram, and you go, you make a fire sacrifice, and this and that. That's not the point. The real point is being engaged in devotional service with a direct connection to Krishna through that service and offering to Krishna, and then giving up sense gratification and taking up pleasing the senses of Krishna. Just like a mother. The relationship of a mother and child is usually considered something pure. Of course, nowadays there are mothers that kill their children also. But previously, it was considered like the relationship of Mother Yasoda with Krishna. It's a very, very pure thing, right? There's no sense gratification involved in it, right? So, what does the mother do? Her whole life is pleasing the senses of the child, right? So, therefore, Krishna can appear as your child, like in the case of Mother Yasoda, or Vasudeva and Devaki, or Kunti Devi, or Kardama Muni and Devahuti. You know, they become the parents of Krishna, and they take care of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appearing as a child. So that is considered something very, very pure when you're dedicated to pleasing your child. Well, just imagine if your child is Krishna himself, you've attained the perfection of life, right? And this is what one of the things that influenced me to start thinking seriously about Krishna consciousness was when I met the first devotees, and they explained to me that normally people go to God and ask for something. Give us this day our daily bread, like the Lord's Prayer in Christianity. He said, but in Krishna consciousness, we don't ask anything from Krishna. We want to give to Krishna. So we give him prasadam, we give him arti, and we give him nice prayers, and we chant his holy names, and so forth. So I thought about that. I said, Jay, that's different. Because, you know, in my church, we're always asking for something, you know. Oh, there's some terrible thing happened, please help us, like that. But here they're saying we don't ask for anything. We're always giving to God, right? So that really, you know, impressed me. That I never heard that before, right? That we should give to God. We shouldn't ask anything from God. So, and then we don't, in Christian consciousness, we don't treat God as the Supreme Father. We treat him as our son, at least in the parental relationship with Krishna. We don't consider him. He's not considered as the Supreme Personality of God. He's considered as the son or the child, and we serve in that frame of mind. So all that impressed me because I had never heard that before. Right? Okay, so now we continue. The whole point of this explanation of the inverted or upside down banyan tree is to teach us how to be free of it, because we can go on eternally being fooled by it and going down this branch and this root and this leaf and this twig, and always being confused about how to become free of this very, very complicated tree. So it says, now there is no ready experience in this world of a tree situated with its branches down and its roots upward. But there is such a thing. That tree can be found beside a reservoir of water. We can see that the trees on the bank reflect upon the water with their branches down and roots up. So we saw a picture of that, right? In other words, the tree of this material world is only a reflection of the real tree of the spiritual world. This reflection of the spiritual world is situated on desire. So the reflection you're seeing of the tree on the bank of a river is being reflected on water. But there is a real tree in the spiritual world, and the reflection we're seeing here is upside down, and it's reflected on desire, which is always flowing like a river. It's always changing, right? So now it's getting more complicated to understand what this tree is, you see. It's not as simple as it sounds, right? So it says, this reflection of the spiritual world is situated on desire, just as the tree's reflection is situated on water. Desire is the cause of things being situated in this reflected material light. So as long as we have material desires, we're caught up in this upside down tree, and there's no way of getting out of it except if we become Krishna conscious. There's no other ways. Not even by following the Varnashram system. The Varnashram system is to help us come to the conclusion that I should completely surrender to bona fide spiritual masters and engage in devotional service, and especially hear every day Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, spoken by genuine devotees, not by speculators. So it says, desire is the cause of things being situated in this reflected material light. One who wants to get out of this material existence must know this tree thoroughly through analytical study. Then he can cut off his relationship with it. This tree, being the reflection of the real tree, is an exact replica. Everything is there in the spiritual world. The impersonalists take Brahman to be the root of this material tree. And from the root, according to Sankara philosophy, come Prakriti, Purusha, and then the three gunas, then the 5 gross elements, Pancha Mahabhuta, then the 10 senses, Dasendriya, mind, etc. In this way, mind, intelligence, and false ego. In this way, they divide up the whole material world into 24 elements. Now, this is another major difference between the Mayavadis and the devotees. The devotees talk about 26 elements. What are the extra 2? One is the Jiva that the Mayavadis reject, and the next is Krishna, who also is rejected by the Mayavadis. So we see why the Mayavadi philosophy will always fall short of understanding how to get free of this tree of entanglement, because they do not understand it completely. They just only understand it partially. And they miss the 2 most important things: the eternal jiva, our eternal soul, of all the living entities, and Krishna's unique Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, our whole thrust here is studying the unique qualities of Krishna. This is a little bit of a side track we're taking now, but it's an important sidetrack to understand why so many people have difficulty understanding Krishna, because they're so distracted by the branches and twigs and leaves and flowers of this tree, this gigantic, imperishable tree of illusion. Why is it an illusion? Because it is an upside-down reflection of the real tree. Just like when we look out there, we're seeing an illusory thing. It looks like the lights are outside the window. Take a look. That's a reflection in darkness. But this tree is worse than that. It's an upside-down reflection in darkness of reality. So it's not only, it's not right side up, it's upside down. The meaning is completely false. Complete. There's nothing real about it. But it looks really real for people who have material desires. So the whole thrust of education is to teach your child to only have spiritual desires, to please Krishna. We can't eliminate desires. That's another fault of Mayavads. Their solution is eliminate all desires. You can't do that. It's impossible. But you can replace all those material desires with pure spiritual desires. That is possible. Okay, so we're seeing now more and more differences between Mayavad philosophy and Vaishnava philosophy. We're seeing now what is the real nature of what we're seeing in the material world. It's an upside down, what you would call illusory representation of something that's real. Okay, so if I break that window and go outside thinking I'm going to find those lights, I'll never find them. They're not there. But if I look through the window, I think, oh yeah, there's lights outside also. You see? But now it's even worse when we come to the banyan tree in the material world. The banyan tree is upside down representation of it. So that's even worse, right? Okay. So one who wants to get out of this material existence must know this tree thoroughly through analytical study. Then he can cut off his relationship with it. This tree, being the reflection of the real tree, is an exact replica. Everything is there in the spiritual world. The impersonalists take Brahman to be the root of this material tree, and from the root, according to Sankhya philosophy, come Prakriti. Prakriti means the material nature. Purusha, meaning the enjoyer, and then 3 gunas, then the 5 gross elements, Pancha Mahabhuta, earth, water, fire, air, ether, and then the 10 senses, which are eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and then you have the 5 objects of the senses, seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, etc. Right? Seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling. Right? So that's the dasendriya, the 10 senses, 10 senses for gathering knowledge: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and then 5 senses of knowledge acquiring, and then 5 senses of objects of the senses called the tanmantras, right? Seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling, etc. And then there are also the 5 working senses. Eyes, the working senses are the arms, the legs, the tongue, the genital, and the anus. So, and then you have the 3 subtle senses: mind, intelligence, and ego. And then you have the aggregate, or the pradhana, the total material elements. So this makes up 24 things. But yet there's 2 more. There's the soul, the individual soul, and the super soul, or Krishna. So the Mayavadis fall short of the full reality, but the Vaishnavas don't. Therefore, the Vaishnavas can actually attain real liberation from the whole cycle of birth and death, and real understanding of the false tree, the banyan tree of illusion, and ultimately to know that there's a real tree like that in the spiritual world, and to understand how to completely disintegrate allegiance or thoughts of this false tree. Okay, so then it says, in this way they divide up, talking about the Mayavadis, the whole material world into 24 elements. If Brahman is the center of all manifestations, then this material world is a manifestation of the center by 180 degrees, and the other 180 degrees constitute the spiritual world. So it's a hypothetical thing now. It's saying, if the Mayavadis think that Brahman is the, as it uses this phrase, the center of all manifestations, then now you draw a line and say, this is Brahman, okay? Then this material world is a manifestation of the center by 180 degrees. So if you draw a circle on the bottom connecting the 2 points of the line called Brahman, then that lower part is the material world. And if you draw another circle on the top part, or not a circle, semicircle on the top part, that's the spiritual world, according to the Mayavadis. Okay? The material world is the perverted reflection of the spiritual world. The material world is the perverted reflection. So the spiritual world must have the same variegatedness, but in reality. The Prakriti is the external energy of the Supreme Lord, and the Purusha is the Supreme Lord himself. So what's happening here is Prabhupada is beginning with the Mayavad concept that everything is coming from Brahman. So you draw a line, like a diameter line, right? So half of what people are seeing is this illusory part, and the other half has to be the real thing that's being of which you have a perverted reflection on the bottom part, right? So then it says a reflection. It says the Prakriti is the external energy of the Supreme Lord, and the Purusha is the Supreme Lord himself. And that is explained in Bhagavad Gita. Since this manifestation is material, it is temporary. A reflection is temporary, for it is sometimes seen and sometimes not seen. But the origin from whence the reflection is reflected is eternal. The material reflection of the real tree has to be cut off. When it is said that a person knows the Vedas, it is assumed that he knows how to cut off attachment to this material world. If one knows that process, he actually knows the Vedas. One who is attracted by the ritualistic formulas of the Vedas is attracted by the beautiful green leaves of the tree. He does not exactly know the purpose of the Vedas. The purpose of in other words, he's attracted to the Vedic rituals. That's not the whole purpose of the Vedas. Just engaging in ritual activity, right? The purpose of the Vedas, as disclosed by the personality God himself, is to cut down this reflected tree and attain the real tree of the spiritual world. Okay, so it's not simply saying performing rituals. It's to cut down their attachment. So someone can be saying those rituals, those mantras every day and still be very attached to the material world. The proof that they're not attached is that they're engaged 24 hours a day in the service of the Lord, as well as hearing regularly Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam every day. That's one proof, or two proofs, that one is cutting away the false banyan tree. Okay. So, then it continues, but I think we're going to continue this tomorrow. Are there any questions so far? So in other words, Prabhupada said, look, they say everything starts from Brahman. So let's say there's a diameter line, and that's Brahman. So below it, you have the material world, which the Mayavadis say is false. And above it, you have the spiritual world, which includes Brahman, but they say there's nothing beyond Brahman. But the reality is, that is true. Let's say the Brahman is that line in the middle of this circle. But below is the material world. The energy of the material world is real. The forms are temporary, so they can bewilder you. But they're upside down reflection of what's in the spiritual world. There's a real tree in the spiritual world, and everything you see in the material world, it exists in its pure form in the spiritual world. And besides the banyan tree, there is Krishna, there is Goloka, there is Vrindavan, there is Brahmajyoti. All these things are there, and it's all dynamic. It's not static, and it's constantly expanding. Right? So Prabhupada completes the imperfect representation of the Mayavadis, right, in this first purport of the 15th chapter. Okay, we'll stop right there. Are there any questions? We'll continue this. We'll finish this tomorrow, and then go back to all the unique qualities of Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. So, I think in the 15th chapter itself, particularly the 16th, 17th and 18th verses, Krishna clearly is establishing that he is above the jiva.
What did you just say? What is above the jiva?
There are two classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible.
Okay, so fallible means they make mistakes, and
Yeah.
infallible means they don't make mistakes.
In the material world, every living entity is fallible, and in the spiritual world, every living entity is infallible.
Okay?
And then the next verse, Krishna says, besides these two, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord Himself, who has entered the three worlds and is maintaining them. And then the 18th verse, he clearly establishes that because I am transcendental, beyond both the fallible and infallible, and because I am the greatest, I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that Supreme Person, the Purushottama. So, I don't know what the interpretation of Mayavadis for these three verses would be.
Well, you have to look it up. You have to go and waste your money buying a Mayavadi book. Or you can go on the internet and look up some Mayavadis and see what they say. Well, that's what Prabhupada did. That's what Prabhuji did, right? Yesterday. Huh? Okay. So that's what Prabhuji did. He looked up verses in the Bhagavad Gita by Mayavadis and compared them to Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. And he saw some major differences. Because the Mayavadis are always going to have an incomplete understanding because they reject the existence of individual souls and they reject the existence of Krishna. They think he's an ordinary person like us. So how can they have a real understanding of things? They have partial understanding, but partial understanding is not enough. Just like Neem Hakim Khatrijan is a half doctor is not a real doctor, right? Your life is at risk if you go to the half doctor.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yeah.
In Mayavadi's philosophy also, because maybe I don't know exactly what Mayavadi philosophy I'm referring to, but in general, there is a concept of soul. Because anybody who's
there is a concept. No, there is, but there's only one soul.
Okay.
That's called Brahman. They reject.
And that is in everybody. That is the concept. There's no concept of living entity and super soul.
Right.
Or Paramatma.
Right.
So that is the difference.
There's just Brahman. It's impersonal, effulgent. That's the only soul. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
They reject the individual souls like you and me. You've been rejected, Prabhu. Me too, by them.
So it's like sky spread into different parts, they say. That's one analogy they say. It's like the same sky. The moment the
No, what they say is a bubble of air in water will eventually come up, but when it touches the surface, it goes like that and becomes one with the air. So that's what they say. That's the analogy. That bubble of air is not a real. It only is existing in when it's in Maya, But when you free yourself from Maya, you merge into the totality of the air. Yeah. So they rejected you, Prabhu. You've been rejected. Me too.
Also, another thing is, you mentioned that circle with the diameter as the spiritual sky or the Brahman,
Yeah.
and spiritual world at the top. But in that depiction, the size of the spiritual world and the size of the material world are equal. Whereas I think you always say, or in the Veda or in the Bhagavad Gita, it is the material world is only 1/4 of the size of the spiritual world.
Yeah.
So that is also different.
But I did mention today that that upper part is always expanding. Right. Yeah. Anyway, an example is not fact. It's just to help us understand something bigger than that. Right? So in other words, analogy is not fact. It's just to help you understand something unknown by something that is known.
another way is like depends on where the sunlight is. You could see the reflection.
It will be a
is
proper
small or
circle,
big.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
Thank you. Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yeah.
One question.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
So my question is basically, generally when a person sleeps, they say he travels and he reaches the Brahman, comes back. So that's the reason
Who said that?
I heard
Which
from-
rascal said that?
I heard from some of the people. I don't remember exactly who it
Okay.
is. But then that's the reason how we have the energy for the next day. But there are times when you...
Well, what if instead of going up, it goes down?
That's what I'm coming to that. So this, I mean, I heard
Then he gets
it
the
could be
bad
false
energy.
too. So I just wanted to have the clarity of mind for that particular concept. So when you have a dream or a bad dream or something, that means you are going to the lower worlds and coming
First
back.
of all, when you have a bad dream, it's the beginning of a karmic reaction for sins that you committed previously. The beginning of that reaction is a form of bad dreams, fear, anxiety, stress. All these things are what you would call incipient beginnings of karma, bad karma. They're the first steps of experiencing bad karma, and then it can develop into even worse things when the karma evolves into its full-blown, let's say, result. And that would mean being ugly, being poor, being uneducated, being sick, having congenital diseases, and so forth. That's the karma has matured at that point. But the beginning of the karma is these bad dreams, stress, anxiety, fear, doubt. All those things are karmic reactions.
So when you have a dream that, in your dream you see Krishna, so what's that?
You see Krishna in your dream?
When you see, I have seen once, not really, multiple
Okay.
times, only once.
Well, you can assume that was something real. Did it look like Krishna? I mean,
It's
was his face like Krishna and his body? Did he have the
I mean,
flute?
it's the imagination maybe could be of the Krishna, but the form
No, but
of what
actually,
we
did
see.
you see? Can you describe
like-
what you saw?
It's like a half, not completely,
Okay.
from the chest and above.
Yeah,
is
it's
what
a
I have seen.
torso.
Yeah.
Okay, but did they have the peacock feathers?
Yes.
Did he have, okay.
And it basically I heard the sound of the flute more.
Okay.
Well,
Well,
it
you're
was
very
like
fortunate. You're
I-
very fortunate.
Thank you. I thought it is a dream, and I woke up, and again, and then when I went back, I could not hear the sound, and when I went back to sleep again, I could hear the sound, the same sound again.
Well, you can assume that was Krishna speaking to you, or inspiring you to pursue his path. Get more interested in devotional service. So that's good.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
One question, Maharaj. So everything in material world is a reflection of perverted reflection of spiritual world. So here in this chapter, why specifically banyan trees?
No, it's one thing that's
is
not a
described.
perverted reflection. That is, if you engage in devotional service sincerely, right? That is real.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So my question is, in this chapter, why specifically banyan trees getting discussed as a perverted reflection, and trying to cut down that detachment. So why there's everything is in spiritual world. So any specific significance of the here banyan trees getting discussed?
Yeah, because banyan tree, you can't figure out what's the original, root and trunk of the tree. You just go here, there, everywhere. You get confused, and it's unending. So you have to cut it or burn it down. That's why it says, fourth chapter, we discussed this already, but we'll go over it one more time, where it says, one second. So it says, Yataydam si samidhug nir, basmasat kuru rijana, Gyanagni sarvakarmani, basmasat kurute tata. As a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions to material activities. In other words, the fire of knowledge, the knowledge of Krishna is compared to a fire, and it can burn up all your karma. That's why coming to class is so important, because every day we light this fire by hearing about Krishna, by discussing Krishna consciousness, by making plans for serving Krishna, right? So you're lighting the fire, and the more heat it emanates, the more your karmic reactions are burned. Right? So it says, perfect knowledge of self and super-self and of their relationship is compared herein to fire. This fire not only burns up all reactions to impious activities, but also all reactions to pious activities. In other words, pious and impious activities, both of them keep you attached to the material world. So then what kind of activities should you engage in? Pure activities to please Krishna, not to please ourselves. Right? Turning them to ashes. There are many stages of reaction, reaction in making, reaction fructifying, reaction already achieved, and reaction a priori. A priori means kutam, in a subtle form. And then reaction in the making, the sins that you're committing right now. And then where it says, there are many stages of reaction in the making, okay? That's sins now. Reaction fructifying, that's when the seed begins to grow, right? And that would be like, anxiety, fear, doubt, all those things, right? And then reaction already achieved, that means you're born, you had an accident, you become blind, or you break a leg, or you catch a serious disease, and it could be polio or something like that, right? So these are mature reactions, right? And then reaction a priori, that is, you die, but you're carrying your baggage from the previous life of the proclivity of being attracted to sinful activity. That in the next life becomes like because of education, influence of the family and so forth, you identify with the body, you develop the false ego, and then the seed is there, the seed of material attachment. And then when it sprouts, then, first it's aparabdha, now it becomes prarabdha. So, therefore he's saying, but knowledge of the constitutional position of a living entity burns everything to ashes. It burns all these things, the kutam, the bijam, the prarabdhas, everything. It burns it all to ashes. When one is in complete knowledge, all reactions, both a priori and a posteriori. So a priori means before birth, and a posteriori means after birth. All these reactions are consumed, they're destroyed, they're burned up. In the Vedas, Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad, it is stated, Ube uhai vaisa ite taranti amrita sad vasad duni. One overcomes both the pious and impious reactions of work. Okay, so that's what this verse is about. 4th chapter, 37th verse. As a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions to material activities. So that's what's happening every time you come to class. We light this fire again, right? And it starts burning away to ashes all these misconceptions that we have and desires, false desires that we have for sense gratification, right? So we're tearing down the edifice of this false banyan tree, right? And then we can take up devotional service without any hesitation. Any other questions? If not, then we'll stop right there. Haribol. So we have homework. Pythagoras. Look him up. He's the only Greek that I know, Greek philosopher I know, that's very close to being a devotee, or if not, actually a devotee.
So shall we explain how close it is?
Well, first of all, you find out. Okay, wait a minute. Who's going to chant? Now, you chanted yesterday. Let somebody else chant. Who wants to chant? Anybody? You want to chant? Okay, cool. Here.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma.
Bandhu Moi Savadhana Mate.
Bandhu Moi Savadhana Mate.
Jahara Prasade Bhai E Bhavatoriya Jai.
Janar Prasade Bhai E Bhavatoriya Jai.
Krishna Prapti Hoy Jaha Hoy Te.
Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite.
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitte Koriya Aikya. Arna kori ho mane asha.
Arana Koriya Mane Asa.
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati. Jai Prasad Pure Sarva Asha. चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से. दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो. प्रेमा भक्ति जहा होते अविद्या विनाश जाते. वेदे गाय जहर चरितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदम जनर बंधु लोकनाथ लोकेर जीवाना हा हा प्रभु कोरो दोया देह मोरे पाद छाया एबे जास गुशुक त्रिभुवाना श्रीला प्रभुपाद पतित पवाना जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा नमो ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रस्थाय भूतले श्रीमती भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी नित्य नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा नित्यानंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare
Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol.
Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Pararajagachasta Tarasatara Shishi Shimad, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnavindi Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Shikoho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Ganga Maya Ki Jai, Jamuna Maya Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Bhavani Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi The lotus feet of our spiritual master
Are the only way by which we can attain pure devotional service. I bow to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates, by him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and master of the devotees. O Lokanatha Goswami, O Master, be merciful unto me. Give me the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all over the three worlds.
We take shelter in lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Namaste Saraswati
So you're saying from there.
Yeah, there's no rain.
This one here.
Okay. Take that off. All right, now we're going to take that and see how the hard.
This is it.
Now there's quality.
Thank you, Maharaj.
See, we didn't have to buy anything.
Now we will start from the women first.
Okay. See? We didn't have to buy anything. It's all here.